Stories from Upanishads.
Retold by Arghya Goswami.
Dear listeners, from the last 3 episodes of my podcast, you have been listening to Yagnavalkya's debates in the King Janaka Symposium. You heard the debates of Ashwala, Aartbhaaga with Yagnavalkya in part 1, then followed by debates of Bhujyu, Usasta and Kahola. In part 2, Yagnavalkya was almost declared a winner in debates when he was challenged by Gargi Vaachaknavi in part 3. However, listening to his philosophies on Brahman, she decided that she must admit Yagnavalkya was the greatest scholar in the symposium and no one can think of defeating him in knowledge of Brahman. Yagnavalkya was an undisputed winner at the symposium and left with the prize of 1,000 cows with 10 gold coins each. Although Yagnavalkya's debates in the symposium had ended with his victory, an announcement of Gargi as he being the greatest knower of Brahman, her open challenge was not liked by many. One such scholar was Vidagdha, son of Sakala. After symposium was over, he confronted Yagnavalkya and he asked him, Yagnavalkya, so far you have been impressive with your knowledge and philosophies on Brahman. Can you answer my questions? Yagnavalkya smiled and nodded his head. This challenge was sudden and he was not expecting anyone to debate him after Gargi's open announcement. However, ego played a bigger role. How many gods are there? Questioned Vidagdha. Friends, before Yagnavalkya answers to the questions asked, I would like to deviate a bit and tell you a story. This is on Nivid mantras. Once Devas wanted to perform a complex yagna or a sacrifice, but Yagna hid himself from them. Since there was no other way out, the Devas decided to perform a simple fire sacrifice. They started reciting Nivid mantras during the sacrifice. As they were nearing the end of the sacrifice, they realized that they could remember the steps of the complex yagna, and eventually their sacrifice was successful. Nivids are named after devas or gods. They indicate Vishwadevas and present the number of Vedic gods in form of a riddle. As it says, the number of devas or gods is 33 or 303 or 3003. Many modern Indologists such as Dr. B.C. Siddharth of Birla Science Institute believe this to be an astronomical unit. As per him, each progression in this arithmetic sequence adds a step of refinement to estimate the length of a year. For instance, the lunar cycle provides a measure of month. However, please note that a year is more than such 12-month units. In medieval times, this was resolved by introduction of the leap year. In ancient times, this issue was synchronized with lunar month counts to equinoxes. So, intercalary or the extra days were added after the fixed count of months. 33 intercalary days approximately were added in a year so that it would measure 365 days, and 303 intercalary days would add to a year to measure 365.2421 days. In Rig Veda, sage Vishwanitra has given the number of gods to be 3339, which is actually addition of 33 plus 303 plus 3003. This number, when considered as a number of intercalary days, gives the average year length to be 365.2424. Now let's listen to Yagnavalkya's response. He said boldly, as many as are indicated in Nivid mantras of Vishwadevas, that is 303 and 3003. Vidagdha said, very well. Then answer my next question. How many gods exactly are there, Yagnavalkya? Yagnavalkya said, 33 gods. Oh, okay. Then tell me, how many gods exactly are there? Again asked Vidagdha. Now Yagnavalkya replied, 6. Oh, now you are changing the number again. So I am asking you, tell me, how many gods are exactly there? Yagnavalkya smiled and said, 3. Vidagdha again asked the same question, and now Yagnavalkya replied, 2. Vidagdha continued to ask the same question again, and now Yagnavalkya replied, 1.5. Now visually irritated, Vidagdha asked him the same question again, as Yagnavalkya was changing the response each time. This time he replied, 1. Vidagdha changed the question track as he was quite frustrated with the response. So he asked, which are those 303 and 3003 gods? Friends, here Vidagdha first asked the larger number of gods and then funneled to smaller number of gods and finally now have asked their identity. Yagnavalkya replied, there are only 33 gods and there are manifestations of them. Vidagdha asked, then which are those 33 gods? Yagnavalkya replied, 8 Vasus, 11 Rudras and 12 Adityas. These makes 31, and then Indra and Prajapati. These all make up to 33 gods. Vidagdha asked again, which are the Vasus? Yagnavalkya replied, fire, the earth, the air, the sky, the sun, the heaven, the moon and the stars. These are the 8 Vasus. These transform into bodies and organs of all beings which serve as support to their work, and these gods help every being to live as they themselves live too. Since they help others to live, that is Vas, they are called Vasus. Vidagdha will not let it go easily. So he continued his questions. Which are Rudras then? Yagnavalkya calmly replied, 10 organs of human body, and the 11th one is the mind. When they depart, the person dies, makes everyone weep. That is Rud. So they are called Rudras. Vidagdha again asked, which are Adityas? Yagnavalkya replied, 12 months of a year are Adityas. As the earth goes through revolution around the sun, they carry a person with it along with his work, because they go taking, that is Ada, all this with them. Therefore, they are called Adityas. Then Vidagdha asked again, which is Indra and which is Prajapati? Yagnavalkya replied, Indra is cloud himself and Prajapati is sacrifice. Vidagdha continued, which is the cloud? Yagnavalkya replied, thunder, that is vigor or strength which can kill others. That is Indra's function. We know that Indra in Vedic context and Zeus in Greek mythology are associated with thunder. Often they are visualized carrying a thunder. Indra's thunder is called Vajra. So you see here how Indra is associated to thunder because of his strength and vigor. Vidagdha again asked, which is the sacrifice? Yagnavalkya replied, animals, because a sacrifice has no form of its own and depends on its means. The animals are its means, therefore they are called sacrifice. Vidagdha asked him, Yagnavalkya, in your earlier response you said there are 6 gods, right? You have been changing your response frequently. So tell me, which are those 6 gods? Yagnavalkya smiled and said, Vidagdha, I made no mistake when you asked me about the number of gods. The 6 gods which I mentioned are the fire, the earth, the air, the sky, the sun, and the heaven. These are same Vasus except the moons and the stars, which makes it 6 gods. In fact, in my previous response of 33 gods are actually these are included. They are wider manifestations of these 6 gods. Then Vidagdha jumped on to another question, trying to clarify the contradictions in Yagnavalkya's response. But you also said there are 3 gods, Yagnavalkya. Explain me that now. Yagnavalkya calmly pointed to the sky and replied, These 3 gods are 3 worlds alone. From the previous 6 gods, the earth and fire together make one god. The sky and the air makes another, and the heaven and the sun makes the third god. So there are 3 gods. In these 3 gods, all gods are comprised and infused. Vidagdha again asked him, You also told there are 2 gods. Explain me that. Yagnavalkya said, The matter and the vital force, as these comprise of all gods that have been enumerated earlier. Vidagdha took a deep breath and asked, Then what about the 1.5 gods? You told us that too. Explain me. Yagnavalkya explained, This is the air that blows. Some scholars say that since air blows as one substance, and then how it can be 1.5. But I would debate it as it is 1.5 because through its presence and all this attains surprising glory. Vidagdha again asked, Yagnavalkya, then you also said there is one God. Explain us that. Yagnavalkya replied, That one God is the vital force or the Hiranyagarbha, the golden cosmic egg. It is the manifestation of Brahman. It is also called Thyat or Dat. It is remoteness. It is the vastness. It is the void. Thus, the gods are one and many. Infinite gods are included into the limited number as mentioned in Nivid mantras. These are again included in successive smaller numbers from 33 to 1, the vital force or Hiranyagarbha, as it is that one vital force or Hiranyagarbha that can expand into all those number up to the infinite. Thus the vital force alone is one and infinite, as it possesses intermediate numbers, that this one God, the vital force, which has different names, forms, functions, activities and powers. These different attributes are due to the individual differences of qualification of each manifestations. Vidagdha asked him again, kind of mocking him, Do you know who resides in the earth, whose instrument of vision is fire, whose light is the manas or the thought, and who is the ultimate resort of entire body and organs? Only true scholars will know this. Friends, in the above question, what Vidagdha wanted to know was about the God who has as earth for his body, fire for his eye, and weighs all matter through the mind and thinks through the mind, identifies himself with earth and is possessed of a body and organs. Elements of the body such as skin, flesh, blood is derived from the mother, which represents the field, and elements such as bone, marrow, and sperm derived from the father, which represents the seed. He also claimed that only true scholars will know this and challenged Yagnavalkya. Yagnavalkya said, Yes, I know whom you are talking about. It is the very being who is identified with the body. But there is something more about it, Vidagdha. Won't you ask me about it? Yagnavalkya mocked him back, asked him that his question was not complete. Furious Vidagdha immediately asked him, "Then tell me, what is the cause of this?" Yagnavalkya replied, "It's nectar or chyle, the watery essence of the food that is eaten by a woman to produce blood in her body. When she is pregnant, she passes this blood through her placenta or umbilical cord to her fetus. The fetus receives the blood, nutrition, oxygen and other life support from this. This blood from the mother helps to produce the skin, the flesh and the bone of the fetus, which are the support of its bone and marrow." Friends, just a step back from the story. Don't you think Upanishads are very rich texts which were way advanced from its time? How did our ancient Indian rishis and sages who composed this Upanishad knew about the embryology? Way earlier than the science of embryology itself was established in the 18th century. First thoughts on embryonic development came from Aristotle, and then the early works on embryology came from various researchers and scholars such as Aldrovandi, Leonardo da Vinci, Marcello Malfigi, and many others. Awesome, isn't it? Vidagdha continued his questions, again mocking Yagnavalkya. "Yagnavalkya, do you know a true scholar must know who has lust or sexual desires as his body, who sees everything through intellect, who weighs all matters through thought, who is the ultimate resort of entire body and organs?" Yagnavalkya replied back mockingly, "Yes, I know whom you are talking about. Who is the ultimate resort of entire body and organs? The one who is lustful and intelligent, filled with wealth of emotions." Go on, Vidagdha. You need to ask me something more, as your question is really incomplete. Irritated Vidagdha asked him immediately, "What is the cause of this?" Yagnavalkya smiled and confidently replied, "It is the woman. She is the only one cause for whom the man's desires are inflamed. She is the one who is full of intellect. She is the only one who is filled with the ocean of emotions." Vidagdha did not stop and continued to ask his questions. "Do you know about the one whose abode is the colors, who sees through the eye, whose thoughts are like light and weighs all matters with it, and the ultimate resort of the entire body and organs?" Yagnavalkya replied, "O Vidagdha, your question needs to be completed, as I know who is that, who is the ultimate resort of the entire body and organs. It is the very being which is so present in the sun. So come on, ask me the complete question at least." Vidagdha, again irritated by this, and quickly asked him, "What is the cause of this?" Yagnavalkya smiled and replied, "It is the eye, dear Vidagdha, as eye is the only truth for the human body. What we see is the truth. We see colors using the eye. The mighty sun has sun rays which is composed of these colors. As per the scriptures, for the sun among the gods is the product of the eye in one's body. So eye is the truth." Vidagdha was now feeling the pressure and was desperate to ask something to Yagnavalkya which he may fumble or may not be able to answer. He changed his questions and asked, "A true scholar would only know that being whose presence is in the space or antariksha, who can see using the ear, whose thinks on all matters and weighs them accordingly, and is the ultimate resort in the entire body and organs." Yagnavalkya, on hearing this, replied, "Your question is still incomplete. I know the being who is identified with the ear and with the time of hearing." Vidagdha asked, Then tell me, what is the cause of this? Yagnavalkya immediately replied, it is the four quarters, Vidagdha, or directions. As per the scriptures, it is from the quarters that this particular being within the body is produced. Vidagdha seemingly frustrated and then continued to ask his mindless questions and started testing Yagnavalkya's patience. He asked again, Yagnavalkya, you claim to be a great scholar. Even this assembly of scholars and sages in this great symposium has admitted you to be the greatest knower of Brahman and the ultimate truth. You must explain me, who is that being who is found in the darkness, who sees using intellect, who thinks, and the ultimate resort of the entire body and organs? Yagnavalkya replied, Vidagdha, it is the very being who is identified with ignorance, which is comparable to the darkness. Ask me further. Vidagdha asked, what is the cause of this? Yagnavalkya immediately replied, it is the death. It is darker than the darkest. Vidagdha continued his questions. Yagnavalkya, tell me now, who is that being whose abode is some specific colors which reflect, who sees via eyes, who thinks, and who is the ultimate resort of the entire body and organs? Yagnavalkya replied, I know whom you are talking about, Vidagdha. I know the being who is in mirror. Vidagdha asked, then tell me, what is the cause of that being? Yagnavalkya replied, it is the vital force or prana. Vidagdha, the vital force or prana exudes reflection of everything like a mirror. Unable to control his anger, Vidagdha continued his questions. Do you know whose abode is the water, whose instrument of vision is intellect, whose light is the thought process, and who is the ultimate resort of the entire body and organs? Yagnavalkya, getting bit irritated by these mindless questions, replied, I do know whom you are talking about, Vidagdha. It is the very being who is in the water. Vidagdha asked, who is the cause of this? Yagnavalkya replied, it is rain or Varuna. Because of this, water fills in the earth, lakes and reservoirs. Vidagdha again asked another question. Now tell me, do you know that being whose abode is the seed, whose instrument of vision is the intellect, whose light is the thought process or manas, and who is the ultimate resort of the entire body and organs? Yagnavalkya replied, I know that being, and that being is identified with the sun. Vidagdha asked, then tell me, what is that being's cause? Yagnavalkya immediately replied, it is the father. O Vidagdha, as father bears the son or the child who is in the seed. Now Vidagdha was thinking hard to ask his next question when Yagnavalkya stopped him, pointing at the Vedic scholars sitting around in the courtroom. He said, wait, Vidagdha, it seems to me that with these Vedic scholars have made you their instrument like a fire tongue, so you can mindlessly argue with me. They must have done that because you do not perceive that you are being consumed by my anger and frustration. The scholastic discussions and debate was now taking an ugly turn. It was taking a form of a dreaded argument. Vidagdha Sakalya shouted back at Yagnavalkya, Yagnavalkya, you have flouted these great Vedic scholars of Kuru and Panchal with your knowledge of Brahman. They are all afraid of you and have made me their fire tongue so that I can argue with you. Yagnavalkya argued back, This is the knowledge of Brahman. I know what are there, its quarters and the directions, the meditation concerning them and its causes and supports. Vidagdha rode back. If you know that, then tell me about meditation with its result. What deity are you identified with in the east? Yagnavalkya replied. With the deity Sun. Yagnavalkya was realized that his own mind was divided into 5 forms according to the quarters, and through it the entire universe as his own self stood facing the east with conviction that he was the quarters. Everywhere in the Vedas it is stated that in this very life one becomes identified with it and attains the God one meditates upon. There is a saying in Vedas, being a god, he attains the God. Yagnavalkya said, Sun is the deity in the east. By this he claimed that he knew the quarter with its deity. Vidagdha asked, On what does the sun rest? This response was on the support of the quarter with its deity. Yagnavalkya replied, On the eye. As stated in the Vedic mantras and in the Brahmanas, from the eye came the sun. That means sun came from the eye, that is in the body, and an effect rests on its cause. Vidagdha asked again, On what does the eye rest? Yagnavalkya replied, On colors, for one sees colors with the eye. The eye itself is directed by the colors to perceive them. Therefore the eye, together with the sun, which is in the east, rest on the colors. Vidagdha extended his questions. On what do the colors rest on? Yagnavalkya answered, On the mind. For the one who knows the colors through the mind, it is on the mind that the colors rest. The colors are made by the mind or heart. The mind is the intellect. The idea is that since one remembers colors as impressions through the mind, therefore colors rest on the mind. Vidagdha nodded and confirmed, Yes, it is just so. Then Vidagdha continued to ask Yagnavalkya about the other quarters. Yagnavalkya, tell me, what deity are you identified with the south? Yagnavalkya replied, With Yama, the god of dharma or justice. Vidagdha asked again, On what does Yama rest? Yama together with south support on the sacrifice, its cause. Yagnavalkya replied, On the sacrifice. Vidagdha asked, On what does the sacrifice rest? Yagnavalkya replied, On remunerations of priests. The priest officiate in the sacrifice, and the sacrificer redeems it from them by the means of remunerations and wins the south together with Yama through the sacrifice. Hence, Yama being the effect, rest on the sacrifice together with the south. The sacrifice is redeemed through the remuneration of the officiating priest. Therefore, it is the effect of the remuneration. Vidagdha asked, On what does remuneration support on? Yagnavalkya replied, On faith. Because a man has faith, he pays remuneration to the priest. So, remuneration rests on faith. Faith means liberty. In Vedas, the faith is coupled with devotion. Only if Yajmana or the organizer of the sacrifice has faith on the priest, he will pay his remunerations. Vidagdha asked, On what does the faith support on? Yagnavalkya replied, On the heart. For one knows the faith through the heart. Therefore, it is on the heart that faith finds its support. Faith comes from heart, and thus it rests on heart. Vidagdha confirmed, Yes, it is just so. Now Vidagdha began his questions on the west and asked Yagnavalkya about the deity identified with the west. Yagnavalkya replied that Varuna, or god of rain, is associated with the west. Varuna rests on the water, and the water on the seed. The seed rests on the heart, Therefore, a newborn child who closely resembles his father as he has born from his father's heart. Thus, it is on the heart the seed rests. On hearing this explanation, Vidagdha agreed and confirmed. Vidagdha continued his questions on the last quarter, that is the north. When he asked Yagnavalkya about the deity associated with the north, he replied, Soma. The Soma rests on the initiation, which in turn rests on the truth. The initiated sacrificer purchases the Soma creeper and sacrificing with that creeper along with meditation attains the identity with the north, which is presided by the moon and named after her. One who is initiated is asked to tell the truth as it is on it the initiation rests on. Truth rests on the heart as one knows the truth through the heart. Vidagdha agreed to Yagnavalkya's explanation and confirmed. Vidagdha now asked Yagnavalkya about the deity associated with the fixed direction above. It is the direction overhead. Yagnavalkya replied that the deity was the fire. In the overhead, there is more light. The fire is luminous. The fire rests on the speech. Speech rests on the heart. Yagnavalkya said that because through his heart extending in all directions has realized all quarters as his own self, the quarters with their deities and supports are a part and parcel of him. He is identified with the name, color, form and action. Of these colors together with the east is one with the heart. The mechanical rites, acts of procreation and rites combined with meditation represent the south, west and north respectively. Together with their results and presiding deities are likewise unified in this heart. All the names together with the overhead direction also reach the heart through speech. The whole universe is comprised in these colors, action and the name, and all these are the modifications of heart. Then Vidagdha asked Yagnavalkya about the heart which is embodiment of everything. Yagnavalkya replied, it is the ghost. As when one thinks heart is elsewhere than within us and the body is dead, the dead body would be eaten by dogs or vultures. The body also consists of a name, color, form, and action and rest on the heart. Vidagdha, still not convinced on Yagnavalkya's knowledge and wisdom, and continued his questions. On what does the body and the heart rest on? Yagnavalkya said, it is prana. Vidagdha counter questioned, on what does prana rest on? Yagnavalkya answered, on apana. Vidagdha again continued, on what does apana rest on? Yagnavalkya answered, on vayana. Vidagdha asked again, on what does vayana rest on? Yagnavalkya said, on udana. Vidagdha asked again, on what does udana rest on? Yagnavalkya replied, on samana. This is the self which is subtle and indistinguishable as it is never perceived. It is undecaying as it never decays. It is unattached as it is never attached. It is unfettered and free. It never feels pain and never suffers injury. The body, the mind, and the vital forces are interdependent and work together as an orderly aggregate. It is dominated by the purpose of individual self. That supernatural transcendent Brahman is immediate and direct, by which all these up to the space or ether are regulated. They rest on them and their causes have their own effects. Only a differentiated object which is within the range of organs can be perceived, but the self is opposite to that. It cannot be perceived. Whatever is gross and made up of parts decays, such as the body, but self is opposite to that. Hence, it is undecaying. A gross object and its parts are always attached to another gross object, but self is never attached to anything. The self is free, whereas whatever is the gross object is bound by something else. That is why self never feels pain, as it is free and unattached. We as gross objects are attached to so many things in this world which gives us pain. The self cannot be destroyed and never suffers any injury, whereas our gross bodies suffer injuries, pain, and ultimately we die. Friends, before I move on with the story, I would really urge the friends listening to this podcast series for the first time to listen to my past episodes, episode number 5 to be precise, Story of Prana, to understand what is meant by Prana, Apana, Vyana, Udana, and Samana. Moving on. After responding to Vidagdha's question, Yagnavalkya was silent and stared at him. He unnecessarily challenged Yagnavalkya again, so now it was his turn. Vidagdha Shakalya, I challenge you. You must answer my question, else your head will fall off. Vidagdha was scared and trembling in fear as he knew he had put his foot on a slipping serpent. He had no other way rather than to accept the challenge. So he shakily nodded. Yagnavalkya asked, There are 8 abodes, 8 instruments of vision, 8 deities and 8 beings. I ask you about that being who is to be known only from the Upanishads, who definitely projects those beings and withdraws them into himself, and who is at the same time supernatural and transcendent. If you cannot clearly tell me of him, then I'll curse you that your head will fall off and you will die in an unholy place at an inauspicious moment, and even your bones shall not reach home. In this, Yagnavalkya changed his stance and now asked Vidagdha to explain own form of being who is only known from the Upanishads. There are 8 abodes which are earth, lust, colors, space, darkness, specific colors, water and seed. The 8 instruments of vision are namely fire, intellect, eye, ears, which takes part in multiple combinations, and the 8 deities are nectar or the watery essence, woman, eye or the truth, directions or the quarters, death, vital forces, Varuna or the rain, and Prajapati or the father. The 8 beings are identified with the body are divided into 8 groups of 4 items such as abode, instrument of vision, light and deity, so as to constitute the universe as it is and withdraws them into himself, that is, into the mind, and who at the same time is beyond the attributes of such limiting adjuncts such as identification with heart and mind. Everyone in the courtroom looked at each other. They were all scared and went into a shell. Vidagdha Shakalya stooped down, unable to explain Yagnavalkya's question in detail, and accepted his defeat and finally walked away from the courtroom. It is assumed that Vidagdha might have met his fate due to the curse, as there are a couple of different instances of the curse of Yagnavalkya. However, the important message of the story provides us that one should not be disrespectful, rather should be submissive to a true knower of Brahman. Then Yagnavalkya continued and told the other scholars in the courtroom, O revered Brahmins and scholars present in this courtroom, whosoever wishes to interrogate and debate with me can debate and ask me questions, or I shall ask anyone among you or question all of you. Are you ready? The scholars and the Brahmins did not dare to speak up or challenge him. When the Brahmins and the scholars were silent, Yagnavalkya told them using the following verse: As a large tree, so indeed is a man. This is true. His hair is its leaves, his skin is its outer bark. When a man is wounded, the blood flows from his skin, and sap flows from a wounded or injured tree. His flesh is his inner bark, and his tendons is his innermost layer of bark. Both are tough. His bones lie under as that its wood. His marrow is comparable to his pith. There is no difference between a man and a tree. If a tree falls, it springs again from its roots in a newer form. From what root, indeed, does the man spring forth after he is dead? Is he reborn? Yagnavalkya was silent for a moment and was trying to judge what answers would the scholars and Brahmins say. However, he might have read their thoughts and said, "Do not say from the seed, as it is produced from a living man. A tree springs from the seed after it is dead. If someone pulls out a tree from its roots, there will be no more sprout. From what root does the man spring forth after he is cut off by the death? If you think he is ever born, I say no, he is again born. Now who should again bring him forth? Knowledge, bliss, Brahman, the supreme goal of the dispenser of wealth, as well as him who has realized Brahman and lives in it. A question of birth is possible only if he is not born or yet to be born, and not for the one who is already born. After death, he is again born by the virtue of fruits of action. The Brahmins and the scholar did not know about this. They did not know about the root of the universe out of which the dead man is again born. The story talks about the knowledge, bliss, Brahman, and the supreme goal, etc. The knowledge is pure intelligence, which is also bliss and not smitten with pain like sense perception, but it is serene, beneficent, matchless, spontaneous, always filled with the content and homogeneous. Only Brahman has all these characteristics. The supreme goal being the bestower of the fruits of action, the dispenser of wealth, that is, the sacrificer who engages in rites. The word rati is wealth and is his possessive force. The supreme goal for him who has realized Brahman lives in it alone, as it has renounced all desires and does no ritualistic work. The word bliss mentioned in the story is not pleasure as we mean it from the plain English. Rather, the word bliss here is epithet of Brahman, as it has been used as bliss Brahman. The word bliss refers to Brahman, but there is no negation of knowledge where there is oneness. So, Yagnavalkya was the best knower of Brahman and proudly took away the cows and the gold coins. No one objected him. Everyone in the symposium greeted him with folded hands as he left. Friends, that was the conclusion to the mega story Yagnavalkya in King Janaka's Symposium. If you remember, or you may have heard the previous parts of the story, one thing is really highlighted. Yagnavalkya's boldness and absolute knowledge of Brahman made all scholars accept their defeat. The talks on Brahman and the Supreme Self were discussed at length using various examples and scenarios. Since this story has reached its conclusion, so as I do at the end of each story, I'll ask you 3 questions. And if you are able to provide me the correct answer, I'll arrange for a special episode with you in the near future, just as I have done in the past. So sit tight for the 3 questions. Question 1. How many grahas and atigrahas are there and what are those? The hint? This concept was discussed in episode 7 when Yagnavalkya debated Ashwala. Question 2. What were the 2 questions that Gargi Vaachaknavi asked Yagnavalkya in the Symposium? Please listen to episode 10, debate between Yagnavalkya and Gargi. And the last question, what are the 8 abodes and the 8 instruments of vision and 8 deities? This was discussed in today's episode. So please email me your responses to arghyathinks@gmail.com. I hope you enjoyed the episode and learned something new from it. Please like, follow, subscribe, download my podcast series and the episodes from all major podcast catchers such as Spotify, Amazon Music, Ghana, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast and many others. I'll come back again with a brand new story from Stories from Upanishad. And until then,